America. My name is Osei-Frimpong, and you're watching The Black Athenians. We're coming to you this nice May Day to talk about culture. What is culture, and what is it to do it for the culture? Someone remarked that black people have an incomplete culture, to which I said, well, we have an incomplete freedom, and if you don't have a complete freedom, you're not going to have a complete culture. White people have an incomplete culture because they have a distorted notion of freedom, and if you have a distorted notion of freedom, you're going to have a distorted notion of culture, because culture is what tells you how to use your freedom. Hey, Mary Bagby. Culture is what tells you how to use your freedom. So insofar as I do this for the culture, I do it because hopefully if you watch this show every week or every other week, or you sometimes binge watch it, you'll learn how to more responsibly use your freedoms. That's why, for example, brute animals don't have a culture. They don't need a culture because, one, they don't need freedom, and two, they have instincts to keep them alive. We need a culture. And so I do this for the culture, and insofar as I'm a person, I do it for our freedom. And insofar as we've yet to have a complete freedom, hopefully this cultural artifact will help us struggle towards and eventually win complete freedom in these United States. So this is a cultural artifact. And so this episode is going to be for the culture, and I'm going to talk about books I think maybe you should read this summer, because I have my handy-dandy book list that I give to just about all my students at the end of the semester. And we're just going to go through some of the books I think you should read for the betterment of our culture. And with that, do you mind hitting the beat?
To the beat, y'all.
Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I paint the White House black and it can feature in your front.
All right, so we are back. I guess I should say a few words about the abortion bills that are running through the South. Insofar as they are just kind of breezing through Georgia and Alabama. And people think that's about gender, but no, you have to understand that white women are the ones who elected the legislators and who are pushing these bills. So it's not gender. This is about us. This is about black people. And it's a form of population control, because you have to remember a few things. One, medical care in the South regarding black people has always been a dicey business. And I'm not just talking about the syphilis studies that were done on the good men of Tuskegee. I'm talking about the forced sterilizations that are ripped through American history in terms of black communities. So we have to understand that attacks on medical care in black communities actually mean something. They mean something because it's about controlling black bodies. It's about population control. It starts out birth control, but it quickly moves to population control. So how is this a form of population control? I'm going to tell you something about New York City that you might not know. In New York City, there were as many black births as there were black abortions. So what does that mean? In New York City, there are as many black births as there are black abortions. That pretty much means that black people can't afford to have children in New York. That means that black people can't afford to have children in New York. So what you have, if you're serious about making sure some of these unborn babies are born, you need an economic program to allow black people to afford to have children, because it's not having a child in these United States is rather expensive. It's rather expensive. I think Yvette did a show about how she figured out it was about $200,000 from zero to like fully functional adult. And we don't have an extra $200,000 per child over the course of that 18 years. And so if you're serious about actually making sure that there are few abortions, and if you want to cut down abortions without coercing people into having kids, then you need economic opportunity. We need to talk about childcare with fully funded childcare workers, so the childcare workers are not slaves themselves. So we need to talk about childcare. We need to talk about schools. We need to talk about wraparound services. We need to talk about the cultural artifacts that make having a kid less onerous. Because right now, black people get abortions because having a child in the United States is onerous. It's not something we do. It's a choice, but it's a choice that's a matter of coercion. Right? So if you don't have any economic opportunities, yeah, you have a choice to get an abortion, but you're not really free. It's just a choice that doesn't mean anything. So yeah, so there are a lot of black abortions because when birth control options, non-abortion birth control options are dicey, because you need health insurance to get a You need health insurance to get a non-abortion birth control option, the pills and the IEDs, and all of that takes health insurance and access, right? And since Black communities are rightfully trustless of a medical institution that spent the last, 150 years with AMA, and then hundreds of years before that forcing medical procedures onto Black communities, we don't go to the doctor as much. Some of that's good, some of that's bad, because the doctors aren't always good. But we also don't we don't have available all of the other birth control options that white communities have. So abortions in the white communities have gone down relatively, whereas abortions in the Black communities have stayed the same because we don't have all of those other birth control options. So if you're serious about getting birth control, getting abortions down in the Black community, we need to talk about alternative birth control options that are available and funded for Black communities, that are safe for Black communities. And we need to talk about economic options so that raising a kid is not like onerous, because I think like 50% of abortions happen to people who are under the poverty line. So that's not abortion as a matter of choice. That's like, I can't afford to raise a kid. That's what we're dealing with. So we have to talk. If you want to know what I think about the bills, one, you can't just say it's men against women. It's honestly, in the South, it's Black people versus white people. And one way to punish Black people is to make them have a kid that they can't afford. So we need the quality of policies that secure serious birth control for Black communities. That's not abortion, but just like, pills and IEDs and vasectomies and all of the condoms and what's up? IUDs and urinary implants. Yeah. So we need to do it. So that'll get the abortion numbers down. But that means you need health care in the Black communities, you need hospitals in Black communities and clinics in the Black communities to get the implants, to get the pills, to get the vasectomies, to get all of the other birth control options that are short of abortion. All right, so if you're not serious about that, don't talk to me about being pro-life, because you're not serious. You just want to punish Black people for having sex. And honestly, a lot of you white women who are watching the show, because I do know some white women do watch the show, a lot of you have awful sex with your husbands, and you just want to punish women who have good sex for pleasure. And so that's what's going on with you. You just want to punish women for having good sex for pleasure. And you're like, well, I have awful sex with my husband, so anybody who gets pregnant having good sex for pleasure, they should be punished. And then I'm going to punish them for making them have kids. So a lot of you who are pushing for abortions just want to punish people for having good sex, and that's not right. And so you know who you are, and you know who white people, you know who some of your aunts and uncles with, who are just like, well, my husband, I have sex because I have to, because my husband makes me. So if you're not having that kind of sex, you should be punished with a child. So that's them. That's not us. They just want to punish us. A lot of punitive white women out there who want to use children to punish people for having good sex. So that's what I'm talking about. Watch out. It looks like it's just about life and abortion and all that, but there's a lot of economic incentives and a lot of economic control that comes with forcing people to have children that they're not economically prepared to have, or that we haven't economically supported as a nation. And this is going to be racialized in the South because we have Black people have disproportionate number of abortions. But, white people can travel. If they need an abortion, they can, take a plane ride up to Virginia or whatever. So this is going to disproportionately punish people who don't have means, and in the South, that's a lot of us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and I mean, I hope that cleared up how I think about this. And don't let them tell you that it's women. Don't let white women tell you that it's women versus men, because Black men have no problem with birth control insofar as we're talking about. It's not Black men pushing this bill. Leave me out of this. Like, I want women to have control of their bodies, but I also want them to have good jobs and health care, and all of the other economic disincentives. And I want all the economic disincentives that punish women for having kids to be like gotten away with, and pregnancy leave and all that stuff. Paid pregnancy leave. None of this unpaid stuff. paid pregnancy leave, and I also want stipends. All right, so that's that. I hope I clarified what's going on in the culture about abortion and how this isn't really about life. It's about control, and we need to be honest about the limited healthcare options that Black communities, especially Black women, have, and get them all of the healthcare options, all of them. Good. So now let's talk about other cultural artifacts that I can help you with, because it's summertime. A lot of people read during the summer. A lot of you guys might be college people, and you're looking for what to read, and I'm going to tell you what to read. You should read. I have a list. I'm going to put this list in the description after I put the video. I'm going to go home, and you'll find the list in the description. It's all the books that I think that people should kind of read to get at a better level. Let's go with, I'm going to start with Sport of the Gods by Paul Laurence Dunbar. Dunbar, a lot of high schools named after Dunbar, and junior high schools named after Dunbar. He turn of the 19th century author, turn of the 20th century author, born in like 1900. Contemporary Du Bois abouts. Sport of the Gods is a fantastic book. It feels like it could be written last week. It's only about 100 pages long. It's a novel about a guy who is born in the South, or a family that's born in the South, and they escape Southern terrorism. They move up to New York, and they leave Jim Crow to go to James Crow. so things in New York do not go very well. And it's a very good story about how there's no escape for Black people. Like you live Jim Crow terrorism, and you go to New York, and you feel like, yeah, there's some different kind of jobs. And I think the dad becomes a Pullman porter or something like that. And it's just another sort. And it's a good story about how confusing it is to be Black. And I think everyone needs stories about how confusing it is to be Black, because it's confusing. It's confusing. And a lot of people are confused about what it means to be Black, and then they end up confusing their kids. And then their kids are confused about what it means to be Black. And I think we can get around all of that by reading good books that kind of clarify what it means to be Black. So Sport of the Gods by Paul Laurence Dunbar is, I think, a nice little novel that kind of lays the state of play, because it'll drive you crazy. It will drive you crazy, like thinking that you've escaped. A lot of Black people in suburbs have gotten this too. You think you escaped the hood, and then you're just in a different sort of jungle, and none of those animals like you. So we have to be honest about that, what it means to escape, because escape isn't freedom, because you're escaping from one jungle to a different jungle, and there's still predators. They just don't look the same. So now that I'm in the South, I'm just like, I might as well make home here and fix this, as opposed to go someplace where it's a different sort of beast. So Sport of the Gods, Paul Laurence Dunbar. Only 100 pages. Nice little novel. Another one, more contemporary, is, I'll start with novels first and go down. Paul Beatty's White Boy Shuffle. Paul Beatty's a wonderful author. This book's a little bit more literary. Came out, I want to say 96, 97. Novel, probably, it's a full-size novel, probably about 250 pages. And it's about another kid trying to figure out what it means to be Black. The Sport of the Gods is about a family. White Boy Shuffle by Paul Beatty is about mostly this kid kind of making his way through high school. A Black kid out in LA making his way through high school. And Paul Laurence Dunbar just won the, not the Nobel Prize, maybe the American, he just won a big prize. It wasn't the Booker Prize, but not Paul Laurence Dunbar, Paul Beatty. Paul Beatty just won a big prize. But I think White Boy Shuffle is his book. And once again, this list will be in the descriptions of the video. All right. Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee. It's a fantastic book about race relations in South Africa. Right? And this is another book, probably about 150 pages, 150, it's not, yeah, about 150 pages long. It's in South Africa about, it's in the point of view of a white professor who doesn't know how big of a jerk he is. And he just kind of learns over the course of the book, because a lot of white people are oblivious. But it's very seductively told, because it's not exactly obvious. The way it's written is the reader isn't really clear about how big of a jerk the white guy is. just like the white guy isn't as big of a jerk about as how he is until he just kind of learns. And then as the reader learns that like, oh, this is how we create white guys who are oblivious about the fact that they're oppressors. And so there's a lot going on in this book, but it's only about 150 pages long. It's really clearly written. You know this is in trouble because the first chapter, this white guy is a professor in his mid-50s or whatever. The first chapter is him and his prostitute is in South Africa. And he's under the impression that the prostitute loves him. He's under the impression because like he asks the prostitute out for a date at the end of their session, and the prostitute like lets him down because, you know, she has sex for money. She doesn't want to date him for fun. But he's kind of confused about this because he thinks that like they have a real thing. And it's her job to let him know, to like let him think that it's a real thing. But really, like, she's a professional and she's just doing her job. She's very good at her job. And that's like, and this comes iterated in this white guy's life who comes to think that people like him for reasons that like have much more to do with his white maleness than like his charm. Right? So it starts out with the first little chapter about him and his relationship with his prostitute. He feels like, well, I've handled the sex business rather elegantly. I have a prostitute I see every few weeks, and we have a lovely time, and I get what I need out of it, and I think she has a lovely time too. Although it's suggested at the end of the encounter, at the end of the first chapter, that maybe it's just a job to her, which it is, and so it kind of sets the tone for how this man might have a distorted view of reality. Like a lot of white guys, it's these white guys who secretaries laugh at their jokes so they think they're funny. It turns out they just have a distorted view of reality. So that's another book, Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee. Going down this list, I like Barbara Kingsolver. The Poisonwood Bible is a good book by Barbara Kingsolver. It's about this missionary family from Bethlehem, Georgia, actually, who goes from Bethlehem, Georgia. White family goes from Bethlehem, Georgia, over to the Congo in the 60s. And they realize a lot of things about what they think they know and what they don't know, about what it is to be a family, what it is to be white, and what it is to be Christian. It's actually a wonderful book. And Barbara Kingsolver is a fantastic writer. I think she's great. It's called The Poisonwood Bible. I have here The Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe. I like it. It's a lot of book, but it's funny. Right, same here with Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. Apparently Hulu's making a miniseries out of that, which is pretty good. It's a lot of book, but it's funny. A Prayer for Owen Meany and Cider House Rules. Those are both books by John Irving. Very good, very thoughtful, and funny. They're full-size books. They're about white people, so if you're looking for a book about black people, that's not going to be it. But like, John Irving's a good writer, and A Prayer for Owen Meany and A Cider House Rules are books that I think if you're in the summer, you should read. All right, so now we're going to talk about three. I'll end with three books by John Steinbeck: Cannery Row, In Dubious Battle, and Winter of Our Discontent. Both lovely little books, only about 150 pages each. Little novels by John Steinbeck. He's a very good realist, like California writer. And all of these, Cannery Row is about just how to deal in a community full of broken people who are broken in like actually interesting ways. People who are functional in a white supremacist society are not very interesting. They're boring and they're conventional and they make all of these boring excuses for their habits of oppression. We don't need to read about them. These are white people who are not very functional in a white supremacist society, so they're actually like interesting. One interesting thing you realize if you ever go to jail, you realize the people are fascinating and funny. And funny, yeah, they're funny. People, yeah, they're funny. These are not bad people in jail. You can be, especially if you're black, you can be on jail for all sorts of reasons. All sorts of reasons. One thing, and this is why, we can't study jail for like all of these like privacy reasons, but I think this is because they don't want people to know that folks in jail are one, normal, two, funnier than folks outside of jail. Like, I've been in a lot of white institutions. I studied philosophy in college, and I have felt more at home talking to people in jail than I have in many a classroom. Because, like, these are just regular folk. The best jail episode. I don't think anybody portrays jail very well in media, but there was one episode of Atlanta, the second episode of the first season of Atlanta, Donald Glover's show, because Donald Glover's a talented little dude. I respect him, from Stone Mountain, Georgia. But the second episode of the first season is set in jail, the most realistic jail experience I've seen depicted in television. So there's that. So that's all for novels. Oh, okay. So, I was going to go through the Steinbeck movie. The Steinbeck novels. Cannery Road's good. It's solid. It's a solid little novel about interesting, dysfunctional white people trying to make their way, and not be awful people. In Dubious Battle is probably the best labor organizing novel I've read. There's a movie out there with James Franco. It's actually not bad. I was expecting it to be worse, and it's not. It's actually pretty good. In Dubious Battle. Apparently, President Obama says that it's one of his favorite books. I don't know. I'm going to have to talk to that Negro about that, because I think that if he'd actually understood the book the way I understand the book, he would be a different type of cat. But in Dubious Battle. So Winter of Our Discontent is the most subtle of Steinbeck's book. It's only about 150 pages, but it's about this white guy who is ticked because he doesn't have the white guy lifestyle that he expects a white guy to have. He's a cashier at a grocery store who's owned by an immigrant. And so he's got this kind of low level white entitlement that kind of governs his behaviors. And he's married to a wife who kind of expects him to provide her with a white guy lifestyle that they've been told that they should have, but so they're both kind of resentful to each other. And so they do kind of awful things, but he's not unsympathetic because all of these entitlements were kind of fed to him, but he does bad things. And then it ends up, and then he's surprised where maybe he's not the greatest father and his kids end up being bad in a different way, but not that different, because white people are always surprised when they raise awful kids, but they raised them to be white, and what are you going to do? You raised them to be awful. So that's all portrayed really well in the novel, and that's Winter of Our Discontent by John Steinbeck. They haven't made a movie out of that, but I'm surprised because that would actually make a decent movie. You think it would make a decent? I think it'd make a decent movie. It'd be a great movie. All right, so now I'm done with novels. Let's talk about how much time? 15. 10. Okay. So now let's talk about race relations. Oh, I'm good out of time. Books on race relations. One, I always say The Psychopathic Racial Personality and Other Essays by Bobby Wright. I did an entire show on Bobby Wright 2 shows ago. Go watch that show too. But read that book because it's a nice little book. The book has to be under 100 pages. And it's just a series of essays. And The Psychopathic Racial Personality is one essay. It's about 12 pages long. As an essay, it's perfect. And Bobby Wright's a doctor, so he's an academic, he's a smart guy. The Psychopathic Racial Personality by Bobby Wright. Wonderful book, and it really does show how, being black in these United States and actually caring about black people is both dangerous business because you're dealing with psychopaths. They don't care about your rights. They might talk, but they don't care about you. And so you just have to understand that you're dealing with a psychopath. That's okay. But, we've made them. Bobby Wright thinks it might be a biological development. He doesn't care. I think it's more sociopathy. And so far as white institutions make white people the kind of people who do not respect black people as humans. They are taught to treat us like garbage. And then black people who want to survive in that system and thrive in that system are also taught to treat black people like garbage. This is why, like I said, I have my problems with the Obamas, and that's both Barack and Michelle. And my problem, and Oprah, I think they've been taught and easily go into that role of thriving, which means treating black people like garbage, and that's not going to be me. And that's not going to be the people who watch this show. But I think The Psychopathic Racial Personality and Other Essays by Bobby Wright actually puts this in plain English. Also, Race Relations in the U.S., The Color of Money by Mercer Baradaran. I had Mercer on this show, one of my early shows. It's a contemporary book. It only came out, I want to say 2 years ago. And it really does, in plain English, lay out generational wealth, generational poverty, and generational exploitation. It's not an accident black people are broke, because we're all working. We've worked as hard as anybody else in the United States. And honestly, considering how much we've taken the heat, we've worked harder. But we've organized a country to exploit black labor and then black rights. Because you understand, like all these bail bonds companies, they're exploiting, black rights. They've all these white teachers in black schools, they're exploiting black rights. Like they're exploiting our right to an education by like creating a job for a white lady teacher. They're exploiting our right to bail by creating a job for a white guy bail bondsman. Like, so we found a way to exploit, like, to be just an exploitable rights-bearing subject. That's not freedom. That's just, you still exist for someone else's profit, asymmetrically, but it's just in a different way. So The Color of Money actually lays this out from the Freedmen's Bank to contemporary America about how generational wealth has just been locked out of the black community, while concentrated risk has been locked into the black community, which gives, on the other hand, white communities a risk holiday. They get to make money without the risk. Because if you don't know, trying to make money in the black community is actually expensive because people don't have money. And so you need to like employ people to collect debts. You need to spend more money on security. You need to we've concentrated risk in the black community while giving white communities a risk holiday. Because what the story is, after slavery and emancipation, America had to figure out how to deal with America's problem, which means how to make the black communities whole. That's America's problem. Not black people's problem, that's America's problem. So what we did is we made America's problem black people's problem, while giving white people a holiday from America's problem. So we've been double taxed. We've been taxed monetarily by just America, but we've been double taxed because we've had to deal with double the share of America's problem, right? So America made America's problem black people problems, and we need to figure out how to make America's problem black America's problem, not take the disproportionate risk and liability onto the black community. So that's The Color of Money by Mercer Baradaran. Also, Women, Race, and Class by Angela Davis. I like Angela Davis. I like old school Angela Davis more than I like new school Angela Davis, but this book is fascinating. It's a book of 13 essays she wrote in the 70s and 80s, early 80s. And, 70s, when she wrote these, she didn't really consider herself a feminist. She was a straight up communist. Like, she was like, I'm communist, and this is what black women are getting it from this, black men are getting it from this, black communities are getting it from this. So, like, she was just laying it down as, like, she would, like, this is before, and I think her writing was more powerful then. I think she, going to jail radicalizes some people, but I think she was radical before and then going to jail. She's like, no, I'm going to put all this down. So she said her time, and like, it's just a wonderful book about, the book is called Women, Race, and Class. It's just a wonderful book about working class black women's struggles against everybody else, mostly against white people, including white women. Right. This is why, like, it's probably better before she became a feminist, because she was like, I think in the middle chapter, she said something like, white women are the worst employers in the history. Like, people talk about white guys being bad, but you do it. There was a survey of black domestic workers who worked for white women. They're like, white women are the worst employers in America. It wasn't just white men, it was white women who were the worst employers. So thinking that, like, oh, my boss is a white lady boss, that means something to you. If you're a domestic worker, that didn't mean nothing. She wanted you to clean those windows. And like, there's another book that came out, I haven't finished it, called They Were Her Property, that was written by a historian, about white women slave owners. And then like after emancipation, white women still beat the crap out of their servants. And like, they were not like this, they were not good people. And, there's a way in which that we haven't changed the interventions, that we haven't made an intervention in the family, the church, and the educational instructions that created awful white women. So like, there's still a way in which, like, I don't know, black people, maybe you trust your white lady boss. But in my experience, white women in power are just as racist as white men in power. It just comes out differently, and That's just been my experience. I don't know. Maybe your experience is different. Anyway, Women, Race, and Class by Angela Davis gives kind of a structure on why that's the case. And she has the essay I teach in my class every time they let me teach a class, and they're going to let me teach a class next semester, is one on housework and the obsolescence of housework. And we just need to actually just socialize and subsidize housework, just like we subsidized, trash. Because it used to be you used to have to take your trash to the dump or burn it in the backyard. Now we have trash people because like men didn't want to take the trash out. So like we need to subsidize housework the same way. Look, 3 efficient unionized housekeepers can clean my house so much better than I can. So like we just need to subsidize and give them a voucher. I pay a little bit, but they get like a full wage for the expertise they have in cleaning my house, and they can knock it out in an hour, what would take me a day. And we just need a voucher like that. So that happens once a month. Everybody gets that. And we pay the professional housekeepers what they're worth, house cleaners what they're worth, and just industrialize it and subsidize it, run it like a submarine or a factory. And have, because right now it's just pretty much an infinite number of work put on some white wives. An infinite amount of work between housekeeping, meal prep, and laundry, housekeeping, cleaning, housekeeping, and and the childcare. Those 3 things, meal prep, cleaning, and childcare. Those 3 things. It's functionally an infinite amount of work. It's an infinite. You could spend all your day doing all 3 of those things, and all you do the next day is get older, and you still have to do it again the next day. So let's pay some professionals to do it, because it doesn't make you a better person. It's not particularly creative work. It's just work you got to do. And so let's pay professionals to do it, unionize them, pay them, like make it a public good, and subsidize house cleaning. Just once a month. Have a team of professionals come in and do it right. And, you pay a quarter of what it costs. The government kicks in the rest. And we'll tax Bill Gates to pay for the balance. All right. So, Crisis of the Negro Intellectual by Harold Cruz. I think this is the first book. There's a lot of book. But it's the first book that actually got me going. It was written in 1968, Crisis of the Negro Intellectual. I read it when I was out of college. I was maybe 24, working at the grocery store. It got a lot of things. It got me into like the virtues of black nationalism, because he's the one who said in this book, in plain English, look, America will confuse you. It'll tell you about rights being individual things. Rights being individual things. It's just individual rights. Black people, you don't have rights, because rights are not individual things, because rights are, in these United States, rights are only supported by groups. So if you're not a WASP, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, if you're not Jewish, and if you're not Catholic, you don't have rights in the United States, because groups enforce rights. Groups enforce rights. And since our group doesn't have any, group power enforces rights claims. And since our group doesn't have any power, all your little individual rights claims don't mean a thing. Because for a variety of reasons. And so he lays this out. That's what he puts out in the introduction. Like all this myth of individual rights is just not adequate to the group foundation among which, out of which rights emerge. So white people have rights, Jewish people have rights, white Protestants have rights, white Catholics have rights, and Jewish people have rights because they have the group power to enforce those rights. Black people, you can talk about your rights all the time. Nobody cares. Nobody cares because you don't have the group power to enforce them. So he goes into that, and he does a lot of things that were kind of new to me at the time when I was 24 and I wrote this and I read the book. He talks about how, look, we need black theater, and we need black culture, we need black self-expression, but watch out when it's just black authors. I mean, when it's just black actors, right, doing a white person story. And we see a lot of this in a lot of movies, right? I guess maybe one of the best ways to get an Oscar, if you're a black actor and actress, or to get Oscar nominated, because we don't win a lot of them, is to be in a movie about black people that's written by and produced by white people. Right? I'm thinking about Will Smith in in the Muhammad Ali movie, and then Jamie Foxx and Ray. I never saw Ray. Was Ray any good? Mary, did you see Ray? The Ray Charles movie with Jamie Foxx. How was it? It's good. All right. So like I don't think it was written by a black person, but apparently it's pretty good. Did you ever see Ray? All right. I never saw Ray. Maybe I should. It was all right. But my mom gave me a cue about how this, my mom does drop some nuggets. So you got to watch out. If a black person's telling this story, if they try to tell it, or if a white person's telling the story, if they try to tell it through the story, or if they try to tell it through the music. If they try to tell it through the music, a white person did it. If they're actually like getting into it, it's a black director and a black producer. So The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual. It's a nice book that actually like gives the argument for black nationalism insofar as we don't need just black actors. If we're going to tell our stories, we need to make sure that there are black producers and black writers who write the story, and black owners who own the theater. So that was the kind of and he talks about like Paul Robeson in a way that was fascinating and gave me a lot of respect for Paul Robeson, and actually the struggle that Paul Robeson, because he was exiled. I think toward the end they cut him out because he stood up for black people too much. They're like, all right, that was nice, but now you got to do your job and sing, Negro. And he was like, no, I'm going to stand up for black people. So it gave me a lot of respect for Paul Robeson and his struggle toward the end of his career when like he kind of got iced out. And it actually opened up the door to all of these other black figures. And I started studying all these other black figures who got iced out toward the end of their life because, money's white. And you started taking out too much of that money. So W.B. Du Bois got kicked out of Atlanta University and then exiled himself out to Ghana at the end because he just gave up on America. But yeah, W. Du Bois, Howard Zinn, I found out, got kicked out of Spelman because he was radicalizing too many black young women at Spelman. So yeah, that book is called The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual. Also, the book gave me a warning sign about Lorraine Hansberry's Raisin of the Sun. Cruz argues that white people love Raisin of the Sun because Elaine Hansberry apparently came from a slumlord dad. Like there are always like 5 rich Negroes in any town, and you got to watch them because they might be not your friend. And so the house Negroes, yeah. So you got to watch them because they might not be your friends. And her dad was one of them. So he's like, you got to watch Raisin in the Sun because it's not exactly a radical play. It's about a black family that moves to a white family and wants to be white and is mad that it's not treated well in a white neighborhood. It's not exactly about how so it's tricky. It's tricky. So he puts a big caution warning about the bourgeois nature of Elaine Hansberry's play and why she was so famous and why it's always done, right? It's always done because it doesn't actually challenge white supremacy. It just wants to it's an assimilation play. They just want black people to be included in white supremacy. And so so he has a problem with that. So that is The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual. The Cross and the Lynching Tree by James Crone. I think every Christian should read at least chapter 2 of this book. It's a little book, but it's uneven. Chapter 2 is perfect. Because James Crone just goes at white Christianity and white ethicists so well in chapter 2, and he takes on Niebuhr, who's like the grandfather of 20th century Christian ethics. You go to a theology school, you'll study Niebuhr, or white school, you'll study Niebuhr, because he's like a thoughtful Christian ethicist who did everything right, except when it came to race, he was like, ooh, I don't touch that. That's too divisive. You can talk about jobs, you can talk about labor, you can talk about all these other justice issues, but if you talk about race, you might split the white church, and I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to talk about race and he was like, that's where the power is. And he says the cross and the lynching tree are too famous because they're actually two symbols of persecution. And so there's actually the similar. So instead of taking the Christ as a liberation from persecution, taking the cross as a liberation from persecution, we've skirted what really is Jesus's message. And black people, it's kind of like the one of the founding texts of liberation theology. So every black person who calls himself a Christian, I think should read at least chapter 2 of The Cross and the Lynching Tree by James Cone. It's perfect. We're going to keep going. Knocking the Hustle by Lester Spence. It's really readable, right? So it's a readable book about how kind of capitalism and neoliberalism, which is just pretty much the privatization of public goods. And then, so once we privatize it, we could charge people for it. And then if you're too poor to buy it, we can just exploit you. So we privatize public goods, charge people for it, and then we keep poor people around because then we can make them do whatever we want because we have goods that they need, and now they don't have money. So it's about how it works in a few different spheres. One of it is like the black church, right? So the black church is great insofar as but you have to be suspicious about it's one of the only organizations that white people allowed us to have. And he has a whole chapter on prosperity, the prosperity doctrine, which is actually really good about how, look, you got to watch out. All of these black churches who want to take the role of government but don't have any accountability for their pastors, right? So, and they don't have any. They want to take the role of government but not be accountable to the congregation in the same way. They're still accountable to the money. So you need to do these things. We don't need more church schools. We need our people on school boards. We need our people in publicly accountable boards and bodies and like pushing for us in a publicly accountable way. Because when you privatize something that ought to be public, you lose accountability in a profound way. So like he has got a nice church on a nice chapter on that, a nice chapter on respectability politics. He has a really nice chapter toward the end on why it's not enough just to say truth to power. Real organizing is growing people's capacity to govern, growing people's capacity to take power and wield it justly. That's what real organizing does. So it's nice if you're just yelling at the power, that's fine. But are you growing people's capacity to govern? I like to think I do that with this. It's one of the reasons why I do this show. I want to grow your capacity to govern. And if you support me growing my capacity to govern, it costs money. So go over to thefunkyacademic.com and kick in for $5, $15, or $50 a month and give me a one-time donation. That's enormous because doing this kind of work makes me just about unemployable. Really close. I'm crafty enough that I still make my way, but pretty soon I'm going to come after you like looking at a legal defense fund because it's only a matter of time before I get sued. But with your help, I can defend myself or I can hire someone to defend me. So I'm not calling for a legal defense fund now, but, start squirreling away for the IME Legal Defense Fund because I know I am. And my wife already knows who to call if I get taken up, if I get scooped up. So there's that. So he talks about the importance of organizing and that segue, he also talks about how you have to understand that all of these institutional actors, whether you're a preacher or whether you're a nonprofit exec, you have your mission, but you also have to keep the lights on. And so that complicates a lot of people's mission, right? So they have their mission, but they also want to keep their job. They want to keep the lights on for their institution, in addition to the mission of feeding the poor or whatever. So you have to understand that these institutional actors have conflicts of interest insofar as they have their own mortgage to pay, right? They have the church has to keep their lights on, so they're not really going to talk about the quality of liberation theology that might alienate some of the money in the crowd. So you just have to keep that in mind. And the book is called Knocking the Hustle. And it goes on about, and it kind of excerpts that line from the Jay-Z song, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman, and how that's like the wrong way to think about what you are as a person, because that screws up your relationships. All relationships are not business relationships. Business relationships are business relationships. And when you start to think of all relationships as business relationships, you just end up doing horrible things to your soul, and you do horrible things to like humanity and your rights. You stop respecting people as people. And so no, you're a person who does business with business people, but you're a person always. And what does that mean when you forget that and just think of all relationships as a business relationships? So it's a good book called Knocking the Hustle by Lester Spence. Education and Equality by Danielle Allen. It's a series of 2 essays, the gist of which is we need to teach black people not so much, soft skills in terms of making white people comfortable. We need to teach black people how to take power. Like, that's what our civics education should be from pretty much kindergarten down. Like, I got a 6-year-old, I teach her how to take power. Like, you got to teach her how to take and wield power justly. Because we don't want to just turn them into, like, oppressors. Like make little black white supremacists or whatever, or little black supremacists. That's not good. We want to actually teach them how to wield power, but we have to teach them how to take it and the levers of power and how to wield it, how to consolidate it and wield it justly. And she's like, that's what civics classes should be. That should be the purpose of our education. She talks about, like, look, you can talk about STEM all you want, and that's fine, but we make enough money. The problem isn't the amount of money made in America, it's the distribution. So we need to distribute the jobs and the capital better. And in order to do that, that's a political problem. And so we need to actually, like, teach people about politics and money. And I'll end with, I can end with The Man Not by Tommy Curry, but that's heavy lifting, people. Look, Tommy Curry, that book is not written for children. So if you're not up to reading the book, it's a fantastic book, but it is dense and rich, and it is serious business. So if you're down for serious business, go ahead, read The Man Not by Dr. Tommy Curry. He's one of my colleagues, and the book is fire, and it might be one of the most important books written in the 21st century. It might go down at that, and you've heard it here first if it does go down as one of the most important books in the 20th century. But it is thick, right? I could talk about a few other books. Profiles in Courage is actually a good book by John Kennedy. Depending on who you talk to, it wasn't written by John Kennedy. It was written by a speechwriter, Ted Sorensen. Whatever. It's a good book about the quality of moral courage that's needed to lead. Because we have a lot of books about what success looks like, and we have a lot of books about courage in battle, but there's a quality of courage that's like willing to risk your job, willing to risk being unpopular, that we don't talk about enough. He goes into details in this book, and it's a nice introduction to courage. That's not just like martial courage in the battlefield, but like, what is it like to alienate yourself from your friend group? What is it like to have, like, what kind of courage calls for that? So that's what I do for the culture, and I do this for the culture, and I hope you appreciate, one, what culture is. And remember, culture is what allows you and enables you and guides you in using your freedom responsibly with others, right? Animals don't need culture because they have instincts and claws and stuff. We need culture because our instincts kind of underdetermined. If it was up to my instincts, I'd eat a lot of salt and sugar and fat. I need culture to tell me to, like, have a salad. And we are cultural beings. We are cultural beings. And so we need to complete our culture and win our freedom. And hopefully this is the quality of cultural artifact that will help you do that. So go ahead, if you like what I've said, send it around to all your friends. And even if you don't like what I said, but it's important anyway, send it around to all your friends. Hit that subscribe button. I need more subscribers. Let's get me up to 10,000. And hit the bell and, give me some money. Because, this costs. Not only in research, but in liability. And I got to pay rent. And I want to pay my interns more and all of that. So thank you for your time. And I hope how long has this show been? Can you say? 48. Oh, that's good. We've had a full show. Thank you for your time. And I will see you next week. Peace.